Hello, Land Talker TV followers. Jim Rothermich here with Iowa Appraisal in Des Moines, Iowa, also known as the Land Talker, with another episode of Land Talker TV. But before we get started, I want to talk about Land Hero. Land Hero is a subscription-based website that would allow you to access uh, sale comps here in Iowa, and it is designed by Stephen Broxes, and it is very user friendly. And I'm going to pull up the website here. Just a second. There we go. Share the screen. There we go. Okay, so here's a screenshot of Land Hero. So if you're a farm realtor or a farm appraiser or a banker, anybody that needs good, high quality farmland sale data, this is your resource. And it allows you to analyze data very fast. And like I said, Stephen Brox has designed this website, and it's very user friendly, and he really knows how to design websites. And so as you can see on the left side here, there's a place for farmland sales, or I've got WRP sales. I've got pending sales that we don't have the results on. I've also got hog facilities, cattle facilities, and rural acreages. There's also a part of this website that you can access that has the upcoming auctions that I've downloaded. And how this is created is I go through about 160 websites every 3 weeks, and I download all the auction flyers and the pending sales, and I get the auction results as they happen. And then on those pending sales, we wait 6 months and then go retrieve those results. So it's very good, high quality data. And I'll just pull up a county here. Say like if you're needing some sale data in Adair County, here's what it would look like. There's a map that pulls up, and you can see all those sales. Each one of those dots on there is a sale, and here's the information you can get. The best part I like about this is you've got a sale bill and you've got an assessor's link, and it'll take you right to it. So if you're interested in Land Hero, go to our website, landhero.us, and there's a demonstration video. So, all right. I've got a really good interview today, and it's Megann Schmidt, and she is a private lands biologist of the Wildlife Bureau of the Iowa DNR in Sioux City. Welcome to Land Talker TV, Megann.
Thanks, Jim. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And so, Megann, part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here is I just bought some farmland up in Palo Alto County, and part of that ground is a slough, and you can't farm it. Part of the reason is it's very fine sand, and the sand plugs up the tile, and it's always wet. It can't be drained, and it's better off in CRP, and it's also part of it's in the wetland CRP. So definitely its highest and best use is not crop production. And so as we're in this wealth transition, there's a lot of people going to start inheriting farms, and they need to know what's out there available, what type of programs are available to them, as if they want to go another direction rather than corn and soybean production. And my thoughts are, Megann, is not all land here in Iowa. I know it's hard to believe, but not all land is suited for corn and soybean production. So there's other options out there. So that's why I wanted to have you on today and talk about some of that. So Megann, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and we'll get into kind of the nuts and bolts. But why don't you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about this topic. Conservation on private lands and these programs is what I do. My 9 to 5, talk to people about it every day. So happy to kind of spread the word and get more folks aware of some of their other options. So a little bit about myself. I actually grew up in Palo Alto County, or just on the border of Palo Alto and Kossuth, outside of Whittemore on my family's farm up there. So grew up there. My dad, brother, uncle, and cousin still farm up there. So I get back there pretty regularly. But right now, I'm over in Sioux City, working for the Iowa DNR. So, grew up Whittemore, went to school at Algona, and then left to go to college at University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. So, kind of been in Iowa my whole life. I love Iowa. I love the northwest part of the state. There's a lot of beautiful natural areas up
Yeah.
here, and a lot to love about living up here. So I'm pretty excited that I could continue kind of working in this part of the state and in natural resources. Um, I guess a little bit about my path to the DNR. So growing up, always liked being outside on the farm, like spending a lot of time outside, and really loved, all of the little naturalist field trips and stuff we'd go on in school, and kind of developed the love for science. So I went to UNI and studied biology and biochemistry, and didn't really know what I was going to do, over the course of that 4 years, but took a bunch of different classes. And by the time I was done, I kind of found out that, the natural resources side of things was what I was really most passionate about. And that led me to an AmeriCorps position with the Conservation Corps of Iowa. I was based out of Ames at the time, but now they're based out of Jester Park there in Des Moines. And it was such a great program. They put us, groups of young adults on crews, and we got to kind of travel around the Midwest, a lot in Iowa, but a lot, in Missouri, Minnesota, Illinois, working with different agencies, private landowners, county conservation boards, state DNRs, different things, managing land, mainly doing a lot of invasive species removal, and that sort of stuff. But it kind of gave me a good array of the world of natural resources, and kind of where I wanted to end up. So following that, I got a seasonal job with the Iowa DNR Missouri River Wildlife Unit. So they're within the Wildlife Bureau, and they're tasked at managing wildlife management areas in a 7-county region over here in western Iowa, based out of Ottawa in Monona County.
Sure.
And so spent about 8 months with them, learning all about land management, prescribed fire, management plans, and learning all about the Les Hills where I live now,
Yeah.
and kind of gaining a lot of that experience. And then part of that job was also working with private landowners on our DNR's Iowa Habitat and Access program. And so that was when I really learned that I kind of like the connection between private lands and natural resources. Growing up on a farm and being around, farmers and folks in agriculture, I really, still care about that world, and am connected to those people. And so being able to kind of bridge that gap between natural resources and agriculture and find the places where they meet, is one thing that, seemed like a real good fit. So I started working in USDA offices in some partner positions in 2020. So I worked for Conservation Districts of Iowa for a couple of years, based out of the Sergeant Bluff office. And then back in November 2021 or December 2021, so going on 5 years now, I'll be in my current position, which is the private lands biologist position with the DNR. So I'm based out of Sioux City, but I cover the northwest 24 counties of the state. So a pretty wide area, but it's pretty fun. There's a lot of cool stuff, from Monona to Kasuth County to enjoy. So I really like it.
Yeah. No, good deal. So you've been in your current position for 5 years. Is it, did I hear that right?
That's going on. It'll be 5 years
Oh,
in December. So
okay, good.
four and a
Good
half.
deal. Good deal. And
Uh-huh.
you got family, husband,
I
kids,
do.
or
Oh no, I'm not married. Nope.
okay, all
Nope,
right.
I'm not married.
That's good.
No. Uh-huh.
Good,
But
good.
yeah, live here in Sioux City. I have a cat and a lot of friends. And so go back to visit my parents, and siblings back in the Whittemore area pretty often too. So
Yeah, that's probably not too far drive for you, is it?
no, only about 2.5 hours, and it works kind of slick, especially when I have work projects up in that area too. So
Sure, sure. Well, I'll
mhm.
kind of let you talk about, what you want to talk about, Megan. Just talk about maybe, the Wildlife Bureau of the Iowa DNR. What do they do? And then I'll just kind of let you go in details, and I'll just kind of let you go.
Heck yes, yeah. So, as Jim said, I work for the Wildlife Bureau of the Iowa DNR. So, the Wildlife Bureau is tasked with managing the state's wildlife populations. And so, a lot of our staff manage public lands, so wildlife management areas across the state. We have a lot of wildlife management units that are in charge of maintaining those public lands for our wildlife species across the state. But the Wildlife Bureau also has many other facets. We've got a research program that does wildlife research and informs a lot of the work that the rest of us do. We've got a depredation program that works with wildlife conflict. And then we have a private lands program, which is what I'm involved in. And so some folks are maybe wondering, why the Wildlife Bureau would care about private lands, considering, we have a lot of public lands to manage ourselves. But when you're trying to manage wildlife populations, they don't really know fence lines or property boundaries. And if we want to have healthy wildlife populations, we need good habitat on our public lands, but we also need good habitat on our private lands too, to support those populations and help them to thrive. And so private lands work is a big part of what our Wildlife Bureau is focused on. We've got a private lands program that consists of 4 biologists, so me, and then I have 3 counterparts across the state, and then 4 technicians that are all full-time DNR employees that work with private landowners. In addition to our biologists and technicians, we also have 15 district foresters across the state that they do work on public land as well, but a big part of their job is working with private landowners on their forest ground, writing forest stewardship plans and helping them manage privately owned forest ground too. So we've got a pretty big program with the 15 foresters, 4 techs, and 4 bios. And in addition to our full-time staff that do those work, we also partner with other agencies a lot. So in the private lands world, you're probably going to get sick of me talking about all the different partners, today, just because there's so many and it really is kind of working together. And so we work really closely with the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the USDA, so the NRCS. We're all based out of NRCS offices and work really closely with them on a lot of their programs and their staff. We also work really closely with Pheasants Forever and their farm bill biologists that they have across the state working with private landowners. And we also work real closely with conservation districts of Iowa, who employ some other private lands conservationists in smaller regions to work with private landowners. As you can imagine, covering 24 counties like I do, it's pretty tough to make real intimate relationships with everybody across that span. So having Pheasants Forever staff, CDI staff, NRCS staff in those local counties that can help make those connections is a game changer. And they're in those offices every day, talking to people too. So yeah, so in addition to all those partners, there's many more. Wildlife Management Institute helps to fund some of our forester positions, and there's all sorts of other agencies and nonprofits working in private lands across the state too.
Yeah, well, as an appraiser, I've appraised land for the Nature Conservancy, Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. There's one guy in our office that does conservation easements, and we have a lady that does it as well. And then there's several of those type of NGOs, non-government agencies, organizations that buy land or buy conservation easements that landowners have the opportunity to take advantage of. And I just posted the map. Here's the map, and if you're watching this and you want to contact somebody, here's Megann Schmidt's territory here in Northwest Iowa, and it's got her phone number on here, and as well as the other 4 biologists that cross the state and their contact information. So
yeah, you can see a couple of vacancies there on the eastern side of the state. Both of my counterparts in the east were ready for retirement about the same time, so they left us here this spring. So we'll be filling those positions hopefully sometime soon, but have got coverage over there in the meantime too. So if you're in eastern Iowa and don't know who to contact, feel free to give me a call and I can direct you. Or same thing with Brian Sauer, who's the technician in Northeast, and Jason Greach, who's the technician in Southeast.
Yep. No, good stuff. Good stuff.
Mhm.
So talk about, what's like some of your most popular program or some of the things you're working on right now,
Yeah,
Megan.
absolutely. Heck yes. So I guess just kind of a general overview of my job. So I'm based out of the USDA NRCS office here in Sioux City, and I work with a lot of USDA programs, but then I also work with some of our own DNR programs that we have, as well as other stuff. So my general day to day is talking to landowners. About the goals of their property, what they're trying to achieve, what they're looking for, and trying to connect them with programs that might fit. And sometimes it's not even programs too. I think one thing that I did want to talk about is, even if government programs aren't your thing. Like I know there's a lot of
Yep,
people that feel that way. There's folks out here that are happy to just walk your property with you and provide some technical assistance, whether it's, restoring a prairie, taking care of a timber, getting more wildlife on site. We can write those plans. We can do all of that and provide that advice without any connection to programs either. But a big motivating factor for a lot of folks is some of the programs, because implementing some of these changes can be expensive, and you can lose out on some revenue if you're not farming areas and stuff like that. So we have some programs to encourage folks to implement conservation on their ground. And kind of like you were saying, Jim, I like that the highest and best use is, the term that we use all the time is finding the highest and best use of those areas. So I guess I'll kind of dive into the one program that is my bread and butter that I would say takes up quite a bit of my time is our Iowa Habitat and Access program. And so that is our public hunting on private land program. So we work with private landowners to help manage their properties, whether it's, some CRPs that they're having tree issues with, maybe CRPs that need to be seeded. Maybe they would like to do some timber stand improvement, just complete CRP mid-contract management. We can help provide technical assistance to landowners, and then we'll also provide financial assistance to landowners completing those management tasks in exchange for them opening that ground up to public hunting access. And it's been a pretty wildly popular program in the state. It's taken off in some areas more than others, but across the state, we've got around 35,000 acres and about 260 landowner agreements for the IHAP program. It's really popular amongst our landowners because they really appreciate, having somebody with technical knowledge helping them managing their land, but then they also appreciate the financial incentives that comes with it too. Completing some of those management things can be expensive, so having the IHAP payments to offset those costs can be a big game changer, especially if they're not a hunter themselves and they don't have folks hunting the ground. A lot of folks feel like they might as well, collect that
sure.
IHAP payment and open it up if they don't care. So, and it's also been widely popular amongst our hunters. It's opened up quite a bit more areas to public hunting access, especially in some parts of the state that maybe don't have quite as many. So that's been a really good deal. So I spend a lot of time, working with those landowners, helping them get some of the different tasks accomplished, whether that's prescribed burns or tree removal or native seeding, working with them, helping them line up contractors, helping facilitate a lot of those contracts and facilitate a lot of that work. And so that's kind of like the big bread and butter program that I spend a lot of my time on. But I could get into, Jim, I got a whole list of stuff. So if you'd like, I can just kind of start diving in
Yeah,
and you tell me to stop. Okay, perfect.
yeah,
Because I
go
didn't,
right.
there is quite a few. And so, not,
First of all, I wanted
yeah.
to ask you about Dugout Creek. It's a
Oh,
public
yes.
wetland restored in Dickinson County. Can you talk about that? It's right here on your website. I was reading about it. Can you tell us about that, Megan?
Yeah, yeah. So wetland restoration is kind of a big part of what we do, especially up in the Des Moines lobe, Palo Alto County,
Yep.
where
Yep.
Jim just purchased the farm. There's a lot of old wetlands that, as Jim was saying, aren't the best for farming corn and soybeans. They flood frequently. It's pretty tough to get a crop out of them. So we do a lot of wetland restoration for wildlife habitat. I am a wildlife biologist at heart, so wildlife habitat's the main thing. But in Iowa, water quality is a big deal too, and so a lot of those wetlands have tons of water quality benefits as well. So Dugout Creek is a great example of restored wetlands. It's up in Dickinson County, that was restored by the Iowa DNR. Geez, and I don't have the timeline on that, exactly how long ago it was restored, but it's an excellent example of, an area that used to be farmed, used to be traditional agriculture, but has been restored to wetland, tallgrass prairie, and is just a wildlife mecca. There's all sorts of species that use that area. And it's doing incredible things for water quality up in that part of the world too. And it's a public area, so anybody can go out and take a hike on it. I'm sure this time of year you'd see all sorts of blooming flowers and some great species too. I bet it'd be a pretty hike.
Yeah, sure, sure. No, well, thanks for sharing that. But go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm just going to let you
absolutely.
roll,
Heck
Megan.
yes. Yeah. So I figure I'll maybe kind of start in with some of the USDA programs, because those are the ones that, I think a lot of folks are familiar with. They maybe heard before, but I could kind of give a little bit more of an overview on those.
Yep.
And then maybe we'll dive into some of the other ones that folks maybe haven't heard about as much. So I kind of divided our USDA programs up into what I call like land use decisions and land management decisions. So the land use decision ones in my brain are like CRP and our ASIP WRE programs, where sites, kind of like Jim was talking about, that maybe aren't the best for corn, soybean, traditional agriculture, might be good candidates for these programs to remove them from traditional agriculture and restore them to native habitats. So our CRP program, or the Conservation Reserve Program, I'm sure a lot of your folks have heard of this one
Yep.
before. It pays annual rental payments to landowners in exchange for them setting aside their land to grassland, typically native grassland. The most of the CRP practices that we have anymore require native grassland seedings. CRP contracts can be a period of 10 or 15 years. And the different practices and programs are designed to target different needs. So kind of up in Jim's neck of the world in Palo Alto County, we have a lot of wetland CRPs to target that water quality and to target that wetland restoration aspects. But over here in the Les Hills, we also have a lot of CRPs that are geared at highly erodible land to protect some of that erosion properties. So CRP can be divided into general and continuous programs. Continuous is generally what we push people towards if they're eligible for it. It has a little bit more specific requirements. So you might need to be able to be eligible for one of those water quality practices or a highly erodible practice. You can't just put any farm into continuous CRP. It generally needs to meet specific criteria for certain practices. But if you are eligible for continuous CRP, it gets in automatically. It doesn't have to go through the whole ranking process across the country. Whereas general CRP, you can submit an application for any farm. And based on what you're willing to do, whether that's, a really diverse pollinator seeding, maybe with a food plot, or maybe you just want to seed, big blue stem, just one species out there too. So your ranking will kind of be dependent on what you're willing to do. And then you submit that to the Farm Service Agency, and those kind of get ranked amongst other offers across the country, and a certain amount get funded. There's kind of like a baseline score that they set, and anything above that gets funded, and anything below that does not. So it's less of a guarantee, but still a good option. If conservation and that sort of practices are your goal, it's still a great option if you aren't eligible for continuous CRP. So there's those two. There's also a grasslands CRP program that folks probably hear about. It's definitely a larger thing out in the western states, I would say, out in the rangeland country. But we still see some of it here in
Yeah,
Iowa.
there's some in
And
Iowa. I
yeah,
know it. I know it
absolutely.
because I had somebody ask me if there's any grassland CRP sales. And I said,
Oh,
yeah, I know of one. And I
nice.
didn't know anything about it, but I remember seeing the sale bill and it said Grassland CRP. And I was like, what the heck is that? Never
Yeah.
heard of it before, but
Yeah. It's a semi-newer program. It hasn't been around quite
okay.
as long as the general or continuous, but it is CRP, so same thing, annual rental payments, but on areas of existing grassland sod. So you can graze it. It's compatible with grazing, but folks enrolled in grassland CRP just need to follow a grazing plan with the NRCS. And so the purpose of grassland CRP is to kind of protect existing grasslands that are present. It is, those areas don't typically have as high of rental payments as our traditional ones
Mhm.
do, because a lot of the areas, wouldn't traditionally be farmed. So the grassland CRP comes with a lower rental payment, but could be a great option for folks, that are grazing, have grassland
Right.
habitat. And it doesn't have to be grazed either. You could have, native prairie habitat and enroll it in the grassland CRP too.
Well,
It's more similar to general CRP in that it is a competitive program. So you submit your offers and you get ranked across the nation. You have to be above the baseline score. And our Iowa offers generally don't do quite as well as offers, further west, but it's still definitely an option. We still have contracts and it could make a lot of sense, and kind of make a little bit of a financial difference for folks, maintaining grassland habitat, whether that be for grazing or just wildlife.
right. Well, to me, it doesn't need to pay as much as regular CRP if you're allowed to graze it. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. Exactly.
uh, so,
Dual use.
um, as far as those pollinator programs, a lot of people talk about that. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so pollinator programs. So pollinator or CP42, conservation practice 42. This world is full of acronyms. So
I
if I
know.
say an
Yeah.
acronym that, yeah, feel free to ask
Yeah.
me what it is. But conservation practice 42 or the pollinator program is a CRP practice geared specifically towards pollinator habitat. So it's got some specific requirements such as a diverse seeding of at least 15 species, I believe. I think it's 5 species of grasses, 10 species of forbs. And forbs are just wildflowers, another word for wildflower. But of the wildflowers, you need to have 3 species that bloom during the different periods. So you need to have 3 spring blooming species, 3 summer blooming species, and 3 fall blooming species. And that seed mix targets the life cycle of a lot of our pollinators. So pollinators and insects are generally on a pretty steep decline globally.
Right.
And so the goal of that program is to restore habitat for a lot of those beneficial insects, like our native bees, our native
Right.
butterflies, our native pollinators. And so planting those native species and having blooming species all throughout the year provide them with their nectaring resources that they need to survive and to reproduce, and to continue on. So there's no CRP practice specific towards it, but there's some other programs geared specifically towards monarch, which is, a species a lot of folks are familiar with that require milkweed in some of those seedings for the host plant of the monarch caterpillar then too. So that's kind of what CP42 is. There was a big push for CP42, I'd say probably about 10 years ago when it first came out. But things have changed a little bit in the CRP policy world and stuff like that. So now for continuous offers, folks are capped at 10 acres of CP42, but general CRPs can go above and beyond that too. So there's still options for both of those available, but maybe a little different than it was 10 years ago when you saw a bunch of those going in. So
Yeah, and maybe not so much this year, but in the past years, they were saying there wasn't enough bumblebees to spread the pollen around. So that kind of helps that situation, doesn't it,
Yeah.
Megan?
Absolutely. Yeah, our native pollinators are, they're good for so many things. Most of the, the food that you and I eat, we have because of pollinators, all the fruits and veggies and all that good stuff. And so our native pollinators are a big deal. And, if we keep seeing, the declines that we're seeing, it could be bad news. And so we want to kind of
Right.
boost those populations and help those species for for the sake of natural areas, but also, for our own grocery stores too. We want a lot of that to be around.
Sure, sure, sure. No,
Mhm.
good stuff. Good stuff.
Mhm. Heck yes. Um, I guess that's kind of what I had. Any other CRP questions for me, Jim? Otherwise, I might get into the WRE program.
Um, just I tell you what, I'll let you go ahead and go into the WRE program. I was going to ask a little bit more about the Grassland
Oh
CRP.
yeah.
So why would somebody put their farm in that Grassland CRP? Um, so if you've got a pasture out there, you
Mhm.
just can't sign that up. I want it in Grassland CRP, can you? Or can you just kind of go through that briefly?
Yeah, yeah. So grassland CRP, it's the EBI score and it's environmental benefits index. There's those kind of across CRP, but if you're interested in enrolling in grassland CRP, one, it's generally native grasslands that rank out the best. So like a Rome fescue pasture probably wouldn't rank out quite as high as some of the native ones, but they could still apply. It would still be an option. And as far as folks, enrolling, some folks would maybe be hampered by the following the NRCS grazing plan, just because that does limit some stubble heights and forage and stuff like that because it wants to leave some cover out there. But there's a lot of folks that graze that way already. And so, for folks that are kind of already doing that, I think it'd be a great option to, just get a little bit, get a little bit more out of the pastures. And
Sure.
with grassland CRP, there is some opportunities for cost share for some interseedings and some other improvements like that too. So could open the door to some of that if folks are interested too. So I'd say it depends on your grazing system. Not all grazing systems fit well with it, but if you're kind of following a conservation grazing system already, I think it's absolutely worth looking into.
Okay. All right. All
Mhm.
right. And then let's go ahead to the WRE program. What's
Yeah,
that stand for?
absolutely. Yeah, Wetland Reserve Easement Program. Good
Okay.
job.
There you
Good
go.
question. And so WRE, it's kind of gone through name changes, but was previously WRP, Wetland Reserve Program.
Mhm.
But Wetland Reserve Easement Program is what it's called now. And this is kind of my other land use decision kind of USDA program in my brain, where it's kind of folks deciding, okay, is the best use of this ground to be farmed, or is the best use maybe something else? And so wetland reserve easement programs are generally are geared towards wetland farms. So if you've got a big pothole wetland, if you're in the floodplain and your crop floods out quite frequently, if you're struggling with a lot of that, WRE could be a good option for you. It's a little more specific requirements to CRP just because it's a little bit more competitive of a program, but it could be a great option for folks with wetlands. So the way it works is if you've got a wetland farm that you'd like to enroll and you apply and you get selected, you would receive a one-time easement payment that's worth approximately 85% of the value of that ground. And so that's a one-time 85% of the value of the ground payment. And then the NRCS, the USDA NRCS, would go in and restore all of the wetlands on that property. So, up kind of in the pothole region, that looks like breaking tile, outletting tile into wetland basins, restoring native seedings. in the floodplains, that looks like digging out old oxbows and removing some of that sediment from old oxbows, breaking tile, outletting tile in wetlands. And so NRCS pays for and does the full restoration. They contract it out, and the landowner then maintains ownership. But in exchange for that one-time easement payment, the landowner is essentially selling some of the rights to the property. So they're essentially selling the farming rights, the development rights, and a lot of those kind of other rights. So those areas could no longer be farmed again, or no longer developed. So it's kind of for those properties that it's like, I am done with this. Nobody's ever going to turn a profit off of this farm. It keeps flooding. It's great for those because it is permanent protection. So those wetland easements are permanent easements that stay with the property in perpetuity. And so once the landowner receives that easement payment, they still maintain ownership of the property. So they still own the property. They still have the right to go out there. They can hunt it. They can enjoy wildlife on it and everything like that. And they can work with the NRCS to get a compatible use agreement to manage the property. So if they want to do prescribed burns or control trees, or if they want to do different things like that, they can get a compatible use authorization with NRCS. But they are still the owners of the property. So they still have that. And then, so some folks that put their ground into WRE, WRP are happy with that. You know, they would love to enjoy the wetland. They'd love to, hunt it and go out there, hike around, watch wildlife on it. But some folks, maybe after they do that, have no interest in maintaining ownership because it still is a liability. You still do have to pay property taxes on it. Depending on the county, it's sometimes a reduced rate, because you're not turning a crop on it, so it's not taxed quite at the same rate, but you still are responsible for those things. And so some folks are motivated to sell it afterwards. And then you could sell for what we call the residual value. So that's that kind of remaining 15% that land has with those other rights already reserved or owned by the US government then. And so it can be a really great program for some of those really troublesome farms that just folks won't ever turn a profit on. And it can be a good way for some folks have those farms, inherit those farms, and maybe they don't really know how to manage them, what to do with them, and so it can be a great way to kind of collect on that and then see it on the way too. And if you're conservation minded too, it can be an awesome way to get a really cool wetland restoration on site. So the NRCS, so this is kind of, they're permanently protected wetlands. So the NRCS does all that they can to restore the habitat on site best as possible. So really great native seedings, really cool wetland restorations. You end up with a cool habitat in the end too. So some folks, just love that. So
yeah. Well, I keep track of WRP sales across the state and try to put them in my file when I find them because there's not that many of them, but it does work well for those bottom farms that like I said, flood out or the soil's real sandy or it's maybe real gummy soil like Luton soil, just hard to farm, just a problem child all the time, and that sure is a good option. And what I found out is sometimes those, depending on how good the hunting is on some of those WRPs, some will sell way better than others, and I've kind of found out, if it's got good duck hunting, it probably will sell pretty dang good, more than that 15% residual, as you were saying. And then if there's some deer hunting on that, high quality deer hunting, it'll probably beat that 15% residual. So it just, as I've watched these sales, it depends on how good the hunting is. And if you've got some good hunting there, it'll really, there's a discount there for it, but sometimes I'm surprised how little that discount is.
Yeah, there can be a lot of value, in those restorations and that property afterwards too. They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really like working on those projects. So.
Yep. All
Uh-huh.
right.
Yeah.
What's the next program you want to talk
We'll
about?
we'll dive in. So I'll go to the other two USDA programs that I wanted to hit on. I maybe won't go quite into as much detail on these, but they're more the land management decision programs that I would say. And so it's kind of like you've kind of already decided how you're going to be using the ground, whether that be farming, whether that be a timber, whether that be a native prairie. You've kind of decided, how you're going to be using it, but you'd maybe like to manage it differently or improve the management. And those are the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. And so these are both USDA programs that help fund conservation practices and improvements on private land. And I tell you what, it's kind of crazy the amount of different practices you could fund. Like I was thinking about, scrolling through the booklet, but the booklet is like 600 pages of some of the different practices, available.
Mhm.
So they can help you fund anything from cover crop, no-till farming, to cattle watering systems, to timber stand improvement, to native monarch plantings. So I'll talk about EQIP a little bit first, and then we'll go into CSP too. But EQIP is pretty straightforward. You work with the NRCS or somebody from your local USDA office, whether that be a Pheasants Forever bio or one of the other partners or an NRCS employee themselves. Come out and can talk to you about your goals and write a management plan. So maybe I work mostly in the wildlife world. So, this can be used on farm ground too for cover crops and stuff like that. But my bread and butter is like native prairie plantings. Maybe you want to remove cedars from remnant prairie or remove invasive shrubs from your prairie or your timber understory. We can come out, write a plan for that, and you can apply for EQIP funds to help you cover the cost of actually of completing that management work. And so it's a real wide variety. The NRCS has the booklet of the different practices posted on their website. So if folks are ever curious, they could kind of scroll through that or get a hold of their local office. But if there's any sort of improvements, whether it's a native prairie seeding or if it's somebody wanting to give cover crops, no-till, that sort of more regenerative agriculture transition a try, this could be a good way to kind of help you get over that first step where it's like, okay, I'd like to do this, but I'd like a little bit of help getting started, and they can kind of help you fund some of those changes on your property. CSP, or the Conservation Stewardship Program, is very similar, but it's geared more towards folks that have been doing a lot of the conservation stuff already and kind of want to take it to the next level. So it looks at all of the acres that somebody manages, and then they write a plan across all of those. EQIP could just be, a field or a farmstead or something like that, but CSP is a whole farm program, and it you work with the NRCS to maintain the conservation practices you're already doing across your farm, and then make different improvements where you see fit. Whether, again, it can be anything from cover crops to cattle watering facilities to native seedings to bird boxes. There's kind of a variety of practices that folks can implement based on their goals. But CSP is a little bit more lucrative in that it's kind of trying to reward some of those folks that have been doing these practices for a while. So it does pay a base payment per year of your CSP contract, in addition to some payments for making additional changes. So in addition to kind of paying for some of those other improvements that you're making too. With both of these programs, there's NRCS rates that have been set, across the state. And generally, they're pretty good, come pretty close to what it costs. But sometimes you fall short. Sometimes you get a little bit more. But generally, it fits pretty well in what the practice actually costs. So
Well, I know one thing, Megan, we're going to hear more and more about those cover crops.
absolutely.
Uh, I was driving around yesterday and you see some of those fields. It really hasn't caught on here in Iowa.
Mhm.
But I did see a few fields out. I was in Northeast Iowa driving around yesterday looking at some farm ground, and you could see the yellow grass where that had been terminated, when the
Yeah.
crop was planted in there. And one thing about nitrates here in Des Moines, you can't
Mhm.
water your lawn right now because of the
Mhm.
nitrates in the river. Um,
Mhm.
we just haven't heard the end of that, and
Yeah.
there's going to be more coming. And so I think, maybe cover crops don't do a lot for nitrates, but it does help on erosion.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Excellent practice. Erosion, soil health, the benefits I think are, even might even be tough to fully realize, what that could be having that living root there year round. And I've seen, some folks have talked to, when it comes to like a no-till cover crop system, really like how you get a little bit more moisture in the no-till system, but if you plant cover crops, they suck that up so you can still get it planted, in a normal time. And so I think there's again, that's nowhere near my area of expertise, but I think there's a lot of good things going on in that world here in Iowa, and I'm kind of excited to see where it goes.
yeah, and I see a lot more probably benefits in southern Iowa than I do in northern Iowa. And we've had some big rains here lately, like down in Mount Air. I think they had like 9 inches in one rain event. And I own land just south of Mount Air along the Iowa-Missouri border, and you could see those washouts in those fields, and it just made me sick.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think going forward, that's we're going to hear more about that, and I do not want the government saying you have to plant cover crops. I want people to do it voluntarily and do it.
See the
And
benefits.
yeah, we don't want
Mhm.
to be forced to do by the government. We want to do it voluntarily. So how we want to do that, I think.
Nice. Perfect. Well, so those are my USDA kind of programs I figured I would highlight. There's a few others too, but they're kind of in specific parts of the state. So there's one called the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is a super cool program that NRCS has been doing that allows local folks to kind of have a say in what some of that farm bill money goes towards, and they can identify needs in their area and kind of gear a program towards that. So we have different RCPP projects across the state that are kind of led by partners, but partners and NRCS combined that fund projects in areas that maybe are more of a need. Along the Raccoon River for water quality, there's an RCPP for wetland restoration, and a lot of those water quality practices just because that's been identified as a need. In other parts of the state, there's RCPPs for all sorts of things. So depending on what part of the state you're in, I'd encourage you to stop by your local NRCS office and see, if there's one of those programs that could fit you too. But with all of those, I'm sure there's something somebody could find that would work for you.
Sure.
So um, otherwise, I was maybe going to talk a little bit about some state programs too. And since
Sure.
we're on the water quality train too, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the different programs that IDALS or Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship has.
Yep.
Um, they've had a real big focus on water quality, soil health, and erosion. That's kind of what they focus on, and so they have programs that can help fund a lot of water quality improvements, whether that's wetland restoration with tile outlets, CREP wetlands, or Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program wetlands to reduce nitrates in tile fed
Yeah.
water. Those are pretty specific locations, but that's kind of a big deal and can make a big difference for water quality too. And IDALS also funds a variety of cover crop and other soil health practices as well, and erosion practices as well. Terraces, putting in terraces and different things like that. So a lot of those are still going through your local USDA office. and there's IDOLS representatives in those offices, then that can kind of help you and connect you to that sort of stuff. So that's, again, I'm a wildlife biologist, so that's not necessarily my bread and butter, but I work with it a lot and work with those people. And, it's all connected: water quality, soil health, habitat, and stuff too. So love to see folks implementing more of those practices on the ground. We also have our Resource Enhancement and Protection Program, or REAP. That is funded through the state, and it can provide resource enhancement projects for a variety of different things. There's a lot of eligible practices like windbreaks, forestry practices like forest stand improvement, invasive species removal, tree plantings, riparian buffers, native seedings. These are all different practices that you could fund through REAP. REAP is generally a smaller pot, so each county gets allocated a specific amount of REAP funds each year. And so it's generally a smaller pot, so it's generally smaller projects that you see going through these. So typically like homestead windbreaks or field windbreaks, if folks are trying to establish those around their acreage, or other smaller forestry projects can be funded through the REAP program. Generally, the cost share on that is about 75% of the cost, typically up to a not to exceed rate. For most counties, it's $1,600. So 75% of the cost up to $1,600, which can make a big difference, if you're planting a windbreak, around your farm or doing other things like that. REAP can be a great program. So,
good stuff.
Yeah. One other small one then that I wanted to touch on before I get into some other stuff is our Prairie Partners program too. And so that's one that my staff and I work with. Again, it's more of a smaller program. We have a smaller funding pot, but we can cover up to 50% of the cost of native seed if it's purchased from one of our Iowa Native Seed Association vendors. They can put a portion of their funds from the seed that they sell into this pot to then be used for folks to get these Prairie Partners projects and receive some funding to accomplish their native seeding. So we have a 2-acre minimum. We have no maximum, but some really big projects sometimes just aren't feasible to fund with this funding, and we'd still be happy to talk to folks and kind of encourage them to find some other funding where we could work with them to find some other funding where we can. But Prairie Partners is great. I'm seeing more and more. I think folks have been hearing about the pollinators. We were talking about pollinators before, and I get calls from folks pretty often about like folks wanting to establish a pollinator plot. Folks tired of mowing some of their acreage, so they'd like to seed it down to native plants and stuff like that. And so, we use that program pretty frequently in those sort of cases. So generally a 2-acre minimum and can be a good option for some of those smaller projects and folks wanting to restore native prairie.
Yeah, no, good stuff, Megan.
Yeah.
Megan, we probably need to be wrapping up.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to go over briefly, and we'll get this wrapped up?
Could I touch on one question that I get quite frequently, and I just kind of wanted to direct folks to their website too. But one question that I've been getting more and more frequently is about protecting land. As Jim, you were talking earlier about a big land transfer that's happening and folks kind of thinking about estate planning and what's going to happen to their farm, when they're gone. And some folks, that have put a lot of work into the conservation on their property and don't want to see that go to waste are interested in protecting some of those improvements. And some of those agencies that you had mentioned before, Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and the Nature Conservancy, as well as some others across the state, but those are the two I work with the most that are great resources for that. They can work with folks on different conservation easement options, different maybe donation or sale options, or kind of whatever fits your goals or your objectives. And Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation actually has a really handy website called it's iowalalandowneroptions.org. And it's a really great website that goes through a lot of those different options and stuff. So knowing that, we're kind of at that transition for a lot of folks, and it's a question I get pretty often. That was one thing I wanted to make sure folks were aware of, in based on our conversation. So
Yeah.
Iowa landowner, IowaLandOptions.org is a good place to go to learn about that. And feel free to reach out to somebody with INHF or myself, and I'd be happy to connect you too.
Sure,
So,
sure. Well, Megan,
but yeah.
I'll tell you, as an appraiser, I get calls from all over the country. Just this week, I'm working with a family. Their mother passed away, and they own a lot of land in northern Iowa, and that family has moved out to California, and so I'm working with them on appraising that estate, and I'm working with another family that live in Ohio. So my point is there's a lot of people that own land that no longer live here in Iowa, and that next generation looks at conservation different. It's really important to this new generation of landowners. And that's
Mhm.
why I think your resources are so important. Um, and there's so many options out there. And the way I'm thinking, Megan, if you inherited a farm and you're thinking, you want to be conservation minded, you don't really know a whole lot. It sounds like maybe you just contact somebody like you and kind of get direction. Do I have that right, Megan?
Yes, absolutely. That was going to be what I wanted to end on. There's so many options, and even some stuff that we didn't even get to today, based on where you're at and kind of what your goals are. So if you've got any questions, want to talk about different conservation options, please feel free to reach out to me. Or another great contact could be your local USDA office. So every county, there's 99, actually there's 100 of them in Iowa. Potawatomi County's got two. So there's 100 of them in Iowa. And so feel free to stop in. Those folks can help you. Me and my counterparts with the DNR can help you. There's a lot of great resources. So please reach out. We're happy to talk.
And
And I
how
can,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say I can maybe pass along my contact info if you want to
Yeah,
put it
yeah,
in the
yeah.
little description of the YouTube video. But you can reach me by email. My email is Megann.Schmidt. So it's Megann dot Schmidt, SCHMIDT, at dnr.iowa.gov, or my phone number is 712-317-7655.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, good stuff, Megan. Thank you for being on Land
Yeah.
Talker TV. I just can't say enough about, the resource you have here and people it blows me away how many options are out there and so it makes me feel better. I can go talk to somebody like you and kind of get direction on how I want to go. And like I was saying, we have not heard the end of these nitrates in the rivers here in Iowa and soil erosion. And there's solutions to all that. And we want to do it voluntarily. We don't want to be forced to do that by the government. So anyway, well, thank you for being on Land Talker TV, Megan. And we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. So anyway, Megan, thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jim.